Hey everyone, Sparks back with another Goddess Victory Nikke video, and NieR is coming back. This is crazy. Now, we didn't really get a lot of details, but honestly, it's a rerun, so any information we had before presumably applies to what is coming next. If you are a new player that missed this, you are in for a treat. This is the most liked collaboration that Nikke has had. People have been asking for it to come back or to make a NieR Part 2, which would be really cool, and I wouldn't rule that out because clearly, as we saw from the live stream, there's a lot of interest in these developers, particularly the game directors wanting to work together and having a lot of admiration for each other. So I'll get into a little bit of kind of the details of what you can expect from the NieR collaboration if you didn't get to do it the first time. But I want to talk a little bit about the live stream that they had, kind of just interviewing each other, which was really interesting to see. By the way, on a personal note, you'll notice that I have been kind of silent the last few days without bringing out Etheria guides or commenting on the Nikke collaboration news with Stellar Blade, which is kind of unfortunate timing, but I have been without internet. I had to travel, and for almost 3 days, I just wasn't able to do anything. So that's why I've been kind of quiet, but we're back. Anyway, so Yoko Taro did a live stream with Shift Up's developers, and then he just left. It's unclear whether Yoko Taro was actually ever there in the first place. He usually shows up with his Ramil mask, and so who knows, maybe it was just a stand-in. I don't know if that was just like a funny gimmick because he's known for being a troll pretty much all the time anyway, but it was kind of funny. So through the whole interview, it was just like Ramil's head sitting there to represent Yoko Taro. And then they had him on either I don't know, a conference call or maybe pre-recorded responses. But anyway, he didn't seem to be physically there for most of the interview. And he's just kind of a weird, quirky guy. If you've ever seen him before, that's not at all surprising for him. They talked about how much they admire each other's work. This was kind of like just a glaze fest over each other, which is sort of to be expected if you've seen other times that they've done interviews together, like when they first collaborated. But it was kind of cool to see just how much respect the Shift Up developers had for Yoko Taro and how much Yoko Taro was really impressed by what the Shift Up developers have done. In fact, they were, I forget what brought this up specifically, but at one point Yoko Taro was talking about how when he and his team, I forget the other director's name because there was another representative there from the NieR devs team, but when they first saw Stellar Blade, when it was first called Project Eve, his thought process was maybe our time is coming to an end. He was so impressed with what they were doing with Stellar Blade. He felt like, we're kind of older developers and, this is where things are headed, and maybe we're done at this point, which I think a lot of people would disagree with, but they definitely were very impressed. And was talking about how Korea and Chinese developers are really advancing rapidly, and a lot of the Japanese developers are very slow to change or adapt new things. And part of it was that not only are they slow to adapt new ways of doing things, but also they're kind of often caught whether they should try and cater to a global audience or if they should just focus on things in Japan. And it's a lot of these issues are just sort of holding Japan back in recent years. He also casually threw some shade at Square Enix, which was really kind of funny. This is not the first time he's done that. Again, this is kind of typical Yoko Taro stuff, just talking about how they would want to go for the cheapest route of doing things and stuff like that. And then the other dev that was with him was just kind of on damage control, being he didn't really mean that. It was really hilarious. I'm sure it was all part of their plan though. Anyway, he also talked about how NieR did what it wanted to do and played to the strengths of Japanese developers instead of catering to other audiences. So when they were first coming up with the NieR world, and this is before Automata came out, of course, because it was the first game, Yoko Taro had his vision and just did what he thought needed to be done versus what might be popular or how it might be received outside of Japan, or even how it might be received within Japan, to be honest. So that was kind of cool, and I think that we can definitely see the results of a clear vision, coming to fruition rather than just trying to be the lowest common denominator, which I think is rarer and rarer these days in all forms of media. So that was kind of cool to hear him talk about that and how that was really an intentional decision. And then they also talked about sort of what made these two developers build their worlds in a post-apocalyptic world, and it came down to surprisingly practical reasons. The first impetus is because it was actually just like lower cost and time, because you have to do fewer characters, fewer assets. It's a lot of just rubble. They started out with smaller teams, and it's kind of interesting to see kind of behind the scenes of like what actually sort of like really influenced these decisions. And of course there were other like creative things, and the fact that they were fans of like other media in the past that were kind of in post-apocalyptic worlds, but like how these practical decisions do enter into these big picture decisions, which I mean makes sense, but something that we probably don't actually think of as end consumers. What else did they talk about? Character design. They said that NieR had a quote-unquote contrarian philosophy, and you can see this if you've played a lot of the NieR games, particularly if you played NieR Reincarnation, which is the mobile game, and I think a lot of people kind of dismiss it, but it really is like the third NieR game. It is kind of a mainline game. Don't dismiss that. But anyway, a lot of the character designs are not what would be considered like typically attractive or like really like popular kinds of things, like in Japan in particular. A lot of characters will either have some kind of disability, deformity, or they're just like not things that would be like really popular amongst a lot of things. And I think that's really kind of cool. Also talked about how, even though some of the characters are very attractive, like 2B, everybody is a big fan of 2B, still wanted to make it as a character that was a real character that could exist in reality, as opposed to being sort of like the fantasy character of like, like if it's like, typical, stereotypical male gamer looking for like this demure, devoted girl or whatever. This is actually like a really independent character that would, be a person in reality, which I think was very cool. And you kind of see that dynamic of them being both very attractive, but also like, very strong, and that's kind of cool. Then they kind of talked about what the philosophy behind the Nikke character design was, and the main driving force behind Nikke was to make all the characters unique. And this is mostly to do with the fact that it is a live service gacha game. They need to make sure that each character is distinctive, and like new players can find something that they enjoy, so they all have a lot of different styles and they need to stand out and be enticing to different people. So kind of cool to see kind of the differences in how they develop their character designs, in that way as well. Then they actually don't view Stellar Blade or Nikke as dark, or at least compared to NieR, which I can kind of see that. And they said they actually see Nikke as more of a romantic comedy, which I get it. I mean, there are a lot of goofy, silly parts in Nikke, particularly, even more so than Stellar Blade. Stellar Blade isn't really that goofy, but Nikke in particular does have a lot of goofy parts. But I think it has a lot of both, and I personally describe it as like a dark fantasy. But NieR does get very serious in a lot of situations, and there are like funny parts of it, but it also is like generally very dark and can be kind of crazy at some points without like giving you guys any spoilers. So anyway, just interesting to see how they viewed their own game. Anyway, so now let's finally get it. So the NieR rerun is coming July 3rd, which is way sooner than I would have expected. Not that I was expecting this at all. I mean, this is going to be like basically like right after the Stellar Blade collab ends with Nikke. And again, these are some very popular characters. So we actually saw 2B perform really well in the recent raid, which is kind of crazy. That's like a long life for the character. Now, in reality, NieR and A2, which are the characters that you get in this collaboration from the gacha, are no longer top tier, but they were very good when they launched, and you do still see them pop up as useful every now and then, and they could still be worth playing or pulling for. A2 can still do crazy damage against enemies that have a lot of parts. They have very unique mechanics, and they have really good designs. I mean, 2B exemplifies the original concept for Nikke that most of the players had. So, and you get free skins, okay? So each unit will have their standard skin, a free skin, and then there was also gacha skins and a pass skin. So look forward to that. And then you have your only male character in the game, which a lot of people don't know this, and it is a robot, so in a way it's not any, gender at all. But apparently does identify as male, even though it has a female voice. So just, yeah, kind of unique little quirks to that. So look forward to that. It had a really good mini game. It's like the 2D shooter that you have in the actual NieR collaboration. 2B scales off of her defensive stats rather than her attack stats, so keep that in mind. And you want to build her for crit. A2, you need to pair a healer with, because it's all about keeping her in her kind of like rage mode. So that's just kind of some highlights of how these characters work. And you can really look forward to a very good event. I think the story in the collaboration is probably the best that we've had so far. Let me know what you're looking forward to the most about the NieR collaboration. Subscribe so you don't miss future videos. Right after this, I'm going to talk about the Stellar Blade collaboration, give you guys my honest thoughts on everything that's coming there. That's major hype, but also I'm a little bit sad about something, which we'll talk about in that video. And I've talked about this so many times now, but again, was out of internet. I will be doing a detailed equipment guide for a Theory restart. So subscribe so you don't miss any of that. It'll really help out the channel. Give this video a like, and I'll catch you guys on stream later tonight.